There is a clock running on the Pacific Northwest coast. It has been running for 326 years, and when it hits zero, these 7 towns will have 15 minutes before they are erased from the map. Ocean Shores, Washington; Westport, Washington; Long Beach, Washington; Seaside, Oregon; Cannon Beach, Oregon; Rockaway Beach, Oregon; and Crescent City, California, for the people who live there. 15 minutes is all they get. Not to pack, not to find their families. 15 minutes to outrun a wall of water moving at the speed of a jetliner. We're going to show you exactly why these towns are so uniquely vulnerable, a story hidden in their geography. If you live near this coast, or know someone who does, which of these towns are you closest to? Let us know in the comments below. This is a story that began on January 26, 1700, around 9 p.m., a rupture that snapped the entire length of a 600-mile fault line. A megathrust earthquake so powerful it sent a wave across the entire Pacific Ocean. So, how do we know this? It's one of the biggest and most underreported geological threats on the continent. An incredible number of people watch our documentaries, but then forget to subscribe. If this is the kind of story you want to understand, take a second and hit that button now. It's the only way to be sure you see what we uncover next. The answer wasn't found in America. It was found in Japan. Historical records from the coast of Honshu describe a mysterious tsunami that rolled in from a clear, calm sea. An orphan wave with no parent earthquake felt anywhere in Japan. For centuries, it was a ghost story, a wave from nowhere. The truth was sleeping 4,800 miles away, buried in the mudflats of Washington state. In the 1980s, a geologist named Brian Atwater was digging in the coastal marshes. He kept finding these bizarre layers in the earth. A layer of old forest soil, then a clean sheet of sand, then another layer of forest soil. And in that soil, he found the dead. Stumps, hundreds of them. The ghostly, sun-bleached remains of giant western red cedar trees. Tree ring data showed they all died in the exact same year, drowned simultaneously. Atwater realized he was looking at the crime scene. The 1700 earthquake didn't just shake the ground, it broke the coastline. The land itself suddenly dropped 6 feet in an instant, plunging entire forests below sea level into the saltwater tide. Killed, instantly, then came the sand. The clean layer wasn't just sand, it was tsunami deposit, the signature of the same giant wave that crossed an entire ocean to become Japan's orphan tsunami. The ghost had a father, and its name was Cascadia. The Cascadia Subduction Zone is not like other faults. The San Andreas fault in California is noisy. It moves, it grinds, it releases thousands of small earthquakes, constantly letting off steam. Cascadia is silent. For decades, geologists thought that meant it was safe, that the tectonic plates were sliding past each other smoothly. They were dangerously wrong. It is a 600-mile-long megathrust fault stretching from Vancouver Island to Northern California. This is where the oceanic Juan de Fuca plate dives beneath the continental North American plate. But it's not diving smoothly. It is stuck, snagged by friction along its entire length. For 326 years, it has been catching, building pressure. Every year, the Juan de Fuca plate shoves itself another 1.5 inches underneath the North American plate, an inch and a half of stored energy, every year. That pressure is physically bowing the land upward, like a spring being compressed. When it finally lets go, the North American plate will snap back. The coast will not just shake, it will drop, 3 to 6 feet in elevation in minutes. Just before the water arrives, the shaking will be violent, and it will last for 3 to 6 minutes, not seconds, minutes, long enough for the ground to liquefy, for bridges to collapse, for every road out of town to become impassable. Then the shaking stops, and the 15-minute clock begins. There will be no official warning, no text alert, no siren from a distant agency. The earthquake will have already destroyed the power grid and the cell towers. The shaking itself is the only warning anyone will get. And for a town like Ocean Shores, Washington, that warning is a death sentence for anyone who doesn't understand the math. Ocean Shores sits on a flat, low-lying peninsula. There is virtually no natural high ground. The community is a maze of residential streets, all of them at or just a few feet above sea level. When the shaking stops, the roads will be buckled and fractured. Escape by car will be impossible. Survival is a foot race, but a race to where? The nearest stable high ground is miles away, across a bridge that will likely no longer exist. The Washington Department of Natural Resources has run the models. For ocean shores, the tsunami arrives in 15 to 25 minutes. A surge of water and debris that will completely submerge the peninsula. It raises a genuinely terrifying question about a place so many people call home. A question these documentaries expose over and over. When the physics of a place are this unforgiving, what does survival even look like? Let us know in the comments what you think the solution is for a town with no high ground. The problem is not the water. It's the time. 15 minutes is not enough time, not to think, not to gather keepsakes. Not even enough time to find your children if they are at a friend's house. It is only enough time to run. Just south of ocean shores lies Westport, another town built on a sandspit, surrounded by water. Tsunami arrival time here is even shorter, 10 to 15 minutes. But Westport saw the math. They saw the impossibility, and they did something no other community in North America had ever done. They built a tower, a vertical evacuation structure. It sits on top of the Ocosta Elementary School, a reinforced concrete and steel platform on the school's roof, designed to hold over 1,000 people high above the predicted floodwaters. Think about what that means. The town's emergency plan is not to evacuate out. It's to evacuate up. It is a pragmatic, life-saving piece of engineering. It is also a concrete admission of a terrifying reality. In Westport, when the big one hits, there is no escape. There is only higher ground. The school was finished in 2016. In May of 2026, the town secured a $2 million FEMA grant to begin building a second one in the Marina District for the fishing fleets and the residents near the docks who can't possibly make it to the school in time. Are they buying survival or just building monuments to a problem with no solution? It's a question you see echoed all along this 600-mile line. Move further south to Long Beach, Washington, a 28-mile-long peninsula that is almost completely flat. An iconic summer tourist destination. Here, the models from the Washington Emergency Management Division are even more stark. Wave heights could reach 60 feet. Arrival in 15 to 20 minutes. It's a strip of sand with one road running down the middle. One way in, one way out. A road that will be a broken wreck after 6 minutes of a magnitude 9.0 earthquake. The peninsula becomes an island, and then the island disappears underwater. If you have ever vacationed here, or know anyone who lives on this coast, this information isn't theoretical. You need to share this with them. Hit the like button so this warning reaches more people before it's too late. The difference between survival and catastrophe is knowing which way to run, and knowing that you must run the second you can stand. This isn't just a Washington problem. In Oregon, the geography conspires in different ways. Look at Seaside. 80% of the town sits just 15 feet above sea level. It's a classic beach town, a place thousands of families visit every year. But it has a fatal flaw. Tillamook Head, a massive rock outcropping, juts into the ocean just to the south. Instead of sheltering the town, it acts as a funnel. Wave energy from a Cascadia tsunami will be focused, amplified, and directed straight into the heart of downtown. Arrival time, 15 to 20 minutes. The evacuation maps, what Oregon calls its beat the wave models, are brutal in their simplicity. They show lines on a map. If you are on the wrong side of that line, you must run. Not walk, not jog. Run for your life. Just down the coast is Cannon Beach, the town famous for Haystack Rock. In 1964, a distant tsunami generated by the Great Alaskan Earthquake slammed into the town, causing immense damage. That was from an earthquake over 1,500 miles away. A local Cascadia event would be incomparably worse. Residents would have maybe 20 minutes to get to the hills that line the eastern edge of the town. But those hills are separated from the beach by houses, shops, and the highway. Thousands of tourists on a summer weekend, all trying to cross the same few streets at the same time, on foot, with the ground beneath them just having violently buckled. Then there's Rockaway Beach, Oregon, a long, narrow town pinned between the ocean and a coastal lake. The beat-the-wave maps here show that for people on the western side of Highway 101, survival is measured in their running speed. An average person's jogging pace might not be fast enough. And all of this culminates at the southern end of the fault. Crescent City, California. This city is, without exaggeration, the most tsunami-battered city in the continental United States. Its unique offshore geography, the presence of the Mendocino Fracture Zone, acts as a near-perfect lens, focusing tsunami energy from across the Pacific directly onto the town. It was devastated in 1964 by the Alaska quake. But for a local Cascadia event, the timeline shrinks to something unimaginable. The shaking lasts for 5 minutes. Then, according to Caloise, residents may have as little as 5 to 10 minutes after that before the first wave arrives. 10 minutes. For decades, the science understood the what: a massive earthquake, a devastating tsunami. What it didn't understand was the how, the internal mechanics of the fault itself. But in the last few years, that has changed completely. The black box is being opened. And what we're finding is more complicated, and in some ways, more terrifying. In June of 2024, a team led by marine geophysicist Suzanne Carbett from Columbia University published a breakthrough study. Using advanced acoustic mapping, they created the first ultra-high-resolution map of the Cascadia Fault's subsurface. What they found shattered a decades-old assumption. Cascadia is not one monolithic fault. It is fractured into 4 distinct segments. This discovery changes the math. It means the fault might not always rupture along its entire 600-mile length. It could break in pieces. A massive, but more localized, rupture on, say, the southern segment could generate an M8 earthquake that absolutely devastates southern Oregon and northern California, while leaving Washington relatively unscathed. Or vice versa. It adds a new layer of terrifying uncertainty. The big one might not be one single event. It could be a series of slightly smaller, but still catastrophic, events. Then, in February of 2026, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. University of Washington geophysicist Malin Wijeratna-Kiddiwala published research that answered a long-standing question: why does pressure build up so unevenly along the fault? Her team discovered what they call fluid highways deep within the central part of the subduction zone. These are channels in the rock that allow pressurized fluids to leak out, acting like a safety valve, slowing the buildup of strain in the area offshore from central Oregon. But in the north, near Vancouver Island, and in the south, near California, those fluids are trapped. The pressure has nowhere to go. It just builds and builds and builds. The research pinpoints the parts of the fault that are under the most acute stress. Not a comforting thought for Seattle. Or Crescent City. I know I've mentioned it before, but if you've made it this deep into the science, you are clearly one of us. So many people gain this knowledge, but forget to hit subscribe. Don't be one of them. Take a half second and click it. It's genuinely the only way you'll see our next investigation. This new science is painting a picture of a system far more complex than we ever imagined. But the most alarming discovery connects Cascadia to its infamous southern neighbor. Chris Goldfinger, a professor of marine geology at Oregon State University, is one of the world's leading experts on this fault. He pioneered the technique of studying deep-sea sediment cores to create a timeline of past Cascadia quakes. And his latest research, published in late 2025, revealed a chilling connection. The southern tip of the Cascadia Fault and the northern tip of the San Andreas Fault are linked, not just geographically, they are synchronized. Goldfinger's sediment cores show that in the past, a massive Cascadia rupture has immediately triggered a magnitude 7.9 or larger rupture on the northern San Andreas. Stress from the first quake is transferred directly to the second, a 1-2 punch. Think about what that means. A magnitude 9.0 that erases the Oregon and Washington coasts, followed days or even hours later by a magnitude 7.9 that devastates the San Francisco Bay Area. A back-to-back mega disaster that would cripple the entire west coast of the United States. Chris Goldfinger put it bluntly, if Cascadia went off. I would take that pretty seriously as a very clear advance warning for the northern San Andreas. This is not a fringe theory. This is the conclusion of the leading scientist in the field, based on geological history written in the seafloor mud. The discovery of yet another new fault in July of 2026 near Shively, California, just south of the Cascadia Zone, only reinforced how complex and interconnected this entire system is. The problem is not just the water, it's the ground itself. The science of subsidence is perhaps the cruelest twist in this entire story. For centuries, the coast of the Pacific Northwest has been rising, bulged upwards by the immense pressure of the locked plates. You are physically standing on higher ground today than your ancestors were 300 years ago. When the fault ruptures, that stored energy is released. The spring snaps back, and the entire coastline from Vancouver Island to Cape Mendocino will instantly drop by 3 to 6 feet. It happens in the first moments of the earthquake, long before the tsunami arrives. The very land the evacuation routes are built on will sink. Roads near the water will flood immediately. Low-lying areas will become saltwater marshes in an instant. The ghost forests that Brian Atwater found weren't killed by the tsunami. They were killed by this, the sudden drop in land that submerged their roots in the ocean. This means the tsunami doesn't have to climb as high to cause catastrophic flooding. The towns are being lowered directly into its path just moments before it strikes. This is the central, brutal fact of a Cascadia event. It isn't a single disaster, it is a cascade of them. First, the earthquake. A shaking so violent and so long it will feel like the end of the world. Infrastructure will fail. Roads will crack. Bridges will buckle. Then, the subsidence. The ground itself falling away beneath your feet. And then, silence. A brief, terrifying calm as the ocean pulls back from the shore, exposing the seafloor for hundreds of yards. The final warning. After that, the water returns. And it will not be a single, clean, cresting wave like you see in movies. It will be a turbulent, debris-filled surge. A rapidly rising wall of water moving at 500 miles per hour in the open ocean and only slowing as it approaches the coast. It will be carrying the wreckage of every home, every car, every tree it has already destroyed. The first wave is often not the largest. Dangerous, powerful surges can continue to inundate the coast for 12 hours or more. So what can be done? The truth is, you cannot engineer your way out of a magnitude 9.0 earthquake. You can only prepare for it. And for decades, that preparation was almost non-existent. The science was a niche academic concern. That all changed in July of 2015 when journalist Catherine Schultz published The Really Big One in The New Yorker. The article went viral. It took the abstract science of subduction zones and translated it into raw, human terms. It described in unflinching detail what would happen to the Pacific Northwest. The article is credited with fundamentally shifting Cascadia from a scientific curiosity to a mainstream public safety emergency. It woke people up. Government agencies like Oregon's Dogami and Washington's EMD began producing the Beat the Wave maps, giving residents a clear, visual tool to understand their personal risk. Communities started holding evacuation drills, and in Westport, they built their tower. More are planned. Ocean Shores is now scrambling to fund and build several of their own vertical evacuation structures. They are threading a needle, trying to build their way to safety before the clock runs out. But the probabilities are not comforting. According to the USGs, there is a 10 to 14% chance of a full margin M90 rupture happening in the next 50 years. That number is often misreported. You may have heard a 37% chance. That higher probability applies to a smaller, though still devastating, quake on just the southern portion of the fault. A 10 to 14% chance of the full big one might not sound high, but geologists view it differently. The historical recurrence interval for these massive quakes is somewhere between 240 and 500 years. It has now been 326 years. We are in the window. The real challenge is psychological. We are conditioned to wait for an alert, a push notification, a siren. For Cascadia, there will be none. The shaking is the alert. When it happens, survival depends on what you do in the first minutes after you are able to stand up. It depends on having a plan. It depends on knowing exactly where the high ground is and exactly how long it takes you to get there. It depends on abandoning everything you own and simply running. For 7 towns and thousands of people, this is not a hypothetical. This is the future waiting for them, a future written in the geology of the coastline they call home. From the sandy flats of ocean shores to the tsunami funnel of Crescent City, the danger is the same. An earthquake that shatters the land, a coastline that sinks into the sea, and a wave that arrives in minutes. The clock is running, the fault is locked, and the pressure builds, 1.5 inches at a time. Every single year. It is not a question of if. The ghost forests of 1700 are proof of that. The orphan tsunami in Japan is proof of that. The only question is when. And when the shaking finally stops, the final 15 minutes for this coastline